Awesome.
Sounds good.
Hey, I want to give a quick shout out to Suzy Williamson. That's so awesome that you're here. Thank you for joining us.
Suzy is actually one of the coaches I work with.
Seriously?
Yeah, Suzy listens to a lot of my stuff, and there's a lot of back and forth there. So hello.
Yeah, Suzy is with Virginia Glory. She's one of the top select ball coaches in the country, no doubt. So really happy that she's here. Oh, and she responded to us. She said no
other place.
Awesome.
Well, thank you.
All right, cool. So we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you again, guys, for being here. Really appreciate it. Tonight, we're going to be working with Footdoctor Esia. He is a sports performance and rehab consultant. And honestly, I am really here to learn as well, because I think what he does is super dynamic, very interesting, and it's a part of our game that can just help elevate coaches, athletes, parents, everybody to the next level. So Esia, thank you so much for being here, and we're excited to learn from you.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Caitlin. I guess I'll kind of give a layout of what we're going to do today and what we're going to go over. So we're going to talk about some fundamental patterns and movements that occur within every one of our athletes. And even though they can seem very fundamental, I mean, a lot of you who were also in the webinar series with Austin, you hear him talk about patterns and sequencing and all those things all the time. It is the same thing. Movement is movement throughout. And if you're going to throw in a particular manner and generate power in a particular manner when you're throwing, the same things happen when you're doing any other movement, whether that's your first step lateral movement, that's a crossover, a drop step, the same things are happening. You have separation of the lower and upper half. You have internal rotation of your femur, which is your thigh bone. And all those things set you up to gain access to muscles that fire to create motion. And that's one of the biggest things we want to understand when we're talking about patterns. And I want to make it very simple for people to understand, because anytime you hear me talk, yes, I'll use some bigger words sometimes. But the reason I do it is because if you look up what I say in Google, you're going to get one definition. You're going to get only one hit. You're not going to get 10,000 other things based off of what 10,000 other people said using that word. So we want to be that specific. And I see we're live on Facebook now. So we want to be able to understand that, and we do it really simply. We're going to talk about just three things: pattern, power, and then play. And the way we're going to go about those things is we're going to tie them to just simple Newtonian physics. If you really want to understand change of direction, that's Newton's first law, the law of inertia. An object that's in motion stays in motion until acted upon by an external force. That object is always your body, and you create the external force. So what that means in either throwing or change of direction, the sum of all your energy is going in one direction. And if you, when you're training or you're doing any type of skill or drill, are not conscious and aware that you need to create an external energy, something that's opposing that motion to change your direction, it's not going to happen. It's the same thing if I have some kid throwing gas and I swing the bat, but I don't swing with any type of intent, there's a possibility I won't overcome the energy of that softball. That can literally happen. And that's how we move. And then we go towards Newton's second law. Force equals mass times acceleration. Oftentimes when we perform drills, we're not even talking about how we're attacking the ground. What are we applying to the ground? We'll get a lot of cues like get your knees up. We'll set up hurdles that force kids to get their knees up. And the game is not played up. It's played horizontally across the earth. And we have to understand very simply that Newton's third law always applies for us. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And that goes into how we teach speed. It is ground contact force equals ground reaction forces. If you are not fast, but you're not even concerned about the amount of force you put into the ground, your speed is a direct reflection of what you put into the ground, period. And if you don't fix that, if you don't worry about that, you can do all the drills in the world, but it's never going to guarantee that it translates to your on-field product. You don't have cones in the game. You don't have grids. You don't have ladders. You don't have all these things. You play. And so ultimately what we want to have when we get to play is that, can I create chaos? Can I give you some type of drill, some type of cue that takes you away from our fundamental patterns of lateral first step, crossovers, or cross runs, whatever you'd like to call them, and drop steps, and then make you either reactively or pre-planned have to call upon a crossover, have to start to get lateral to get a ball, have to drop step to go and cut something off. Because if we get to play type drills and you can't visibly see that there's a change in, number one, the force they apply into the ground to change their direction, and then number two, that the positioning of their foot is going to sequence well all the way to their hips, then we haven't learned anything. You have a lot of athletes that just got better at running from cone to cone. And we can't have that. That's why there's such a big gap between drills and actually translating to, is my athlete being more explosive? And in my environment, I get kids similarly to what hitting coaches and pitching coaches get. I don't have 2 to 3 days a week, even sometimes 4 days a week that other trainers would have or a facility they would have. I have to be as impactful and as possible. And I only see kids 2 to 4 times a month for the most part. And so everything that you would see of an athlete that works with me is from 2 to 4 hours a month. And that's it. So I have to be extremely effective in doing that. So what we're going to do is I'm going to share my screen and we're going to talk about the predominant patterns when we're talking about those motions.
And guys, for those just joining us, we're going to do our prize giveaways after Esia's presentation, and then we are going to do another one after Q&A. So be sure you can post your questions here if you're on Zoom in the Q&A section or in the chat section. If you're on Facebook Live, post it in the comments, and then we will get to your questions at the very end.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the first thing we're going to talk about is our lateral first movement. Okay. And so things that want to happen when, and actually this is our crossover, excuse me. So we'll talk about crossover. So if we see this played full motion, that's just a general crossover and we're getting flat. So things that are important. So like if you tuned in last week and you heard about separating the upper and lower half, what happens when we cross over is that our energy has to come from the foot that's underneath our glute, underneath our hip. So when we cross, one of the biggest mistakes we're going to make is we're going to exchange our hip height for vertical energy instead of straight across. If I'm a coach and I'm videoing, and you can just video a kid just shuffle. Most kids will shuffle by jumping up and down slightly instead of moving horizontally across the earth. That means that for every inch you gain vertically, automatically you lose that inch horizontally. How often do we lose games? Do we miss balls by an inch, half an inch, our fingernail? And a lot of those things we will yell and get upset and be like, you got to get to the ball quicker. That's an obvious solution. And I tell kids a lot, it was like, we all understand that, that's duh. But are you telling me how I get there better? What happened when I moved first? And so we have to understand that when we're performing a crossover, especially if we're a middle infielder, our objective, if we're crossing over, is generally we're going to sprint or flatten immediately after. So it does not matter that I am fast. If I can't cross quickly, or if I get vertical when I cross, I'm not going to have the range that my speed would dictate. Meaning, I don't care if you can squat 400 pounds and hip thrust 300 pounds. If you can't transfer that type of contraction, that type of firing of your butt across the earth, doesn't matter. And we do that through positioning. And so that's what we would call our first step. How do we pattern a crossover? So our crossover is going to be deeply rooted in what we do with this inside leg. How we access that inside leg is important. Most crossers will falsely pivot with this foot. If you notice, I rotate. And I want to make a clear distinction between pivoting and rotating. Because if you pivot, understand that if your goal is to apply force into the ground, to get force out of the ground, you can't do that with a pivot. I've never seen someone bounce a basketball and it stay and spin around the floor and then come up. That's what a pivot is. And so when you pivot in any motion, you are not applying force into the ground as maximally, meaning as high or potentially as high as you can, period. So that's wrong to start. Now, how we get there is you're going to see a shift of my hips from this foot. I have to shift my hips over by applying pressure into the ground there. What allows that hip to turn is at the same time, my elbow is going to open my hip. We have a simple rule when we're teaching movement. What the feet start, the hips finish, the hips follow, and the elbow finishes. Your elbow is always your driver. And we're not going to talk about the hand. We're going to talk about the elbow, because your humerus is where swing ends. So when that happens, I shift that weight. Notice that weight shifts with the inside. As that happens, my foot rotates to get underneath, directly underneath my glute. What this forms for us is what we would call, number one, an acceleration angle of the shin, which is right here. And number two, this triangle, if we understand that triangles are the strongest geometric shapes because when they're equilateral, they distribute tension evenly. They also tell us what is our ability to get contraction of our hips. Because for a lot of kids, if I'm to pivot and if I instead drive this leg high, which is what most of us do when we set up hurdle drills or we set up the PVC pipe on the floor and have our kids cross over multiple times and all this, they're bringing their knee up. If we watch what I do to set this up and we draw a line at the height of my hips, there is almost zero change as that happens. That's what we're trying to create. Because when that foot rotates, it gives me the ability to get on the ball of my foot and really drive. You see how I don't get on my toes? I stay on the ball of my foot, and the next frame is me getting out. That has to happen. If we cross over and this doesn't happen, we're not covering a lot of ground because the position of our foot gains us access to be able to drive with those glutes. And there's simple science behind this. If my knee, inflection, meaning right here, if we looked at your thigh bone here and then your shin here, inflection, there are certain ranges and angles that science tells us already that either my hamstrings and my glutes can fire. Your hamstrings are what's known as a hip extensor, meaning they extend your hips, meaning they signal to your butt to be able to be used and drive energy wherever your hips are starting to face. If I don't position my foot in a manner that gets those angles and positions to happen, nothing matters. I'm not going to be explosive. So if we watch this kind of in full speed, why is it not going? So for some reason that play button isn't working. Let's see. That's okay. It's probably the horizontal view. But we want to be able, and I'm just flattening here, we have to have these things happen. We cannot have huge exchanges of hip height. This 45 to 55 shin angle means that I'm going to have good energy and I'm going to push in that direction. If you're a coach and you're watching video, the less of an angle you have at the shin, the more that's going to tell you where the knee is going to extend to. And we have to understand those things. So this is why patterns are more important, or the most important for us. I have to get used to understanding this pattern. So we would do this across 10, 15 yards, just focusing, am I seeing initial push to shift weight from the hips here to get my glutes and hips over this inside leg? And then am I exploding and doing the work to push from it? Because what you'd see if you saw this in full motion, there's a considerable change in how I push away from the ground in that inside leg. And that's where we talk about power. Power is the application of being in a good position. And an easy analogy to understand about that is if I hold a bottle of water in the position for me to drink it, that doesn't mean I can drink it. I haven't opened the cap. I have to use the muscles in my mouth. I have to perform work regardless if I'm in position to drink that water. The bottle can be completely upside down, but if the top's on and I don't swallow, even if I take the top off, I'm not going to drink it. Positions are one, and then like we talked about, pattern, power, play. Power is the next step. And if I'm not considerate of applying force when I'm in good positions, then it doesn't matter. It's not a one piece equals this piece. It's I have to do all those things. So when we see this in our cross, one of the biggest mistakes we'll make is, like I said, we'll have a hurdle and we'll line that hurdle up right here. And then we'll only have the kid get to right here. And we can't have that happen. You have to, every time you're talking about cross, the kid and athlete has to learn how to cover ground first. And they have to learn how to cover ground without getting vertical. The taller you get, you're going to get a lot of kids that miss balls if they cross once and open up to a shuffle to get balanced. The reason they miss balls off the tip of their glove is because their hips are still moving vertically. And because your hips are moving upward, your knee is going to start to straighten. So you only get the length of your arm. And if you're standing right now, or if you're sitting, get up and have your legs straight and see how close to the ground just your arm gets without bending your knees. And then if you bend your knees, how much closer to the ground does your arm get? And how much further can you reach if you push into different directions with knees bent? You can completely take yourself away from this optimal position if you don't have your foot rotating, you have it pivoting. What that's going to mean is if I don't put power with this inside leg, automatically you're going to see kids swing this leg over here. And if I swing my left leg, that means it becomes an anchor for me. It's like having a softball tied to a rope. If I throw the softball, the rope follows the softball. So what's going to happen is if you swing your leg, more often than not, you're going to drift backwards because that leg is going to swing this way. And we can't have that happen. And so if we're talking about fundamentally how this pattern should happen, we have to be considerate of those things. I want good shin angles, and that starts with pressure on the opposite leg. And then once I'm there, I've got to perform the work of really, really bang, getting away from that space. And if you notice, once my elbow swings and I get to this position right here, I pull my elbow backwards to flatten me. The reason I pull my elbow backwards is because I said my elbow drives me. If I were to continue swinging my elbow laterally, almost like to my rib cage and away from my rib cage, that would keep me moving in a lateral manner with that sprint. But because I changed the path of my elbow, and then you see me swing this inside elbow backwards, that allows me to absorb my energy and stop. If I were to continue to pull that elbow to my rib cage that way, I could get deeper into a shuffle. And that's what we're going to see in our shuffle pattern. Is it okay, Caitlin, if anyone has questions based off of that?
Yeah,
and kind of that way we don't get too far in.
Yeah, sure. Guys, if you got any questions, drop them in the chat here, and also on Facebook Live.
Awesome. So I'm going to go to the next video, and then if we get some questions in there, I want to do lateral step first. There we go. Okay, so this is our lateral first step. And so one of the things that you hear Austin, and if you were on there, you heard Austin talk about, is how the torso separates. If you noticed the difference between my hips moving separately of my torso in that crossover, those are the same things. If you lack the ability to separate upper and lower half, you're going to have issues being an agility or change of direction type athlete. Because if I'm moving and I'm running and I'm sprinting, if you watch really fast and really good movers sprint, when their right leg lands, their left torso, their left shoulder, and your head is over on the side of that right leg. That's how we move. We move in spirals. There's nothing linear about how humans move or how humans create power. And we've got to understand those principles. And if we lack an ability to separate upper and lower half, you're still going to be slower and you're not going to produce the type of force you want. So those things are important in all aspects of movement, not just hitting, not just throwing, pitching, any of those things. So when we talk about first step lateral movement, our biggest key here is going to be internal rotation. And we hear that word a lot, and we're talking about this leg. So there's a rule that we have. If I'm moving laterally, if I'm not moving anywhere that's not straight forward or straight backward, my opposite leg drives that movement. Notice in our cross run, I talked about that the opposite leg, our left leg, pushes the hip into position for the right leg to fire. It is the same principle happening here, but because I'm not going to cross over, if I were to shuffle twice, this left leg would be responsible for taking me in any degree that was to my right side. And this is going to be a principle that will apply in drop steps again as well. So what we want to happen with this leg is when we move, and this is a patterning drill, all we do is have the athlete focus. It's not a balance drill. Notice, I don't come up, my hips don't gain a lot of height when I move my knee over. I'm literally trying to get just knee to knee. Because what I'm trying to create here is I want to be in the position I play in. I want to be at the height I play in. And I want to learn to create good positions and then good power from the height I play at. A lot of us will do balance exercises, and you'll do your balance exercises standing up. Try to balance standing up if you're good at it, and then bend your knee like you're lowered in half. And see how much different that type of balance happens for you. The reason that happens is just because as soon as your knee flexes to a certain position, your hamstring is more heavily involved with you trying to balance. And if you have a weak hamstring, and the hamstring is the large muscle on the back of your leg, there's 4 different hamstring muscles. 3 if we, you have your semis, which are responsible. They're on the inside of your leg, and they're responsible for internal rotation of the hip. They help your hips internally rotate. And then there's your bicep femoris, which is more on it has a short head and a long head. And that muscle is more on the outside of your leg. And it's the one that's commonly tight for a lot of athletes. And so that's the one you'll typically, if you release tissue, the one most people would tell you to target. But we have to understand that in these positions, your hamstring, when you're balanced, if it is weak, if you don't develop the hamstring, it's going to be very hard for you to produce power in a playing position, but easy for you to do it in a sprint position. And what I mean by that is a lot of us see kids who are really fast in a straight line, but they stink at changing direction. A lot of that is a result of the inability for their hamstrings to work well when they're in this lowered position, because they have to turn on more. And if I don't develop them, I don't use them, your hamstrings deal with how you absorb energy when you contact the ground. And so if you don't have to change direction and you absorb energy just in a straight manner, forward and just going forward, it's much less energy that you have to deal with, because it's not going everywhere. It's just straight. And as soon as you have to change direction and redirect that energy back, then it becomes difficult for that person, that athlete. But it's because the hamstrings are heavily involved in change of direction. So when we lean over, we don't bring this knee up high, ever, 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 ever. And so what you'll notice is I'll start to lean towards the direction I'm going, because generally that's what's going to happen. Notice, look at the angle of my foot. I'm already internally rotated with my foot, and you can see my knee internally rotate. The reason I need to internally rotate is because if you were to stand up right now and understand that your knee is a hinge joint, meaning it just flexes straight up and down. Now you could get decent power with both your knees, like if you saw both my knees facing the screen, you could get decent power to move laterally. You could, but if I rotate my hip internally, the same way we do when we throw to produce more force and effort, the reason I'm going to get even better access number one, to energy, number two, to the ability to increase the type of energy I do, is because of that position. If I internally rotate, I tell my glutes that they are about to fire, number one, and then I change the position that my knee joint is going to unhinge. And we see that happen. As I hit the ground, notice how my knee, and it's not just rotated in. It's not what you see like when kids squat or something. It's not a valgus, because if you saw me from a side view, I'd still be over the top of my fourth and fifth toe, which is where we're getting good balance from. But my knee's going to start to initiate energy in the direction I want to go, which is this way. What that's going to allow me to do is when I push that energy, middle infielders are typically going to half shuffle and then cross, or you're going to half shuffle, receive. Rarely we're going to take a full shuffle. So I've got to be able to get in great position to move laterally. Corners, same thing. We're not really going to cross over as much, but we are going to have a great lateral first step. And if I don't start initiating internal rotation of my hip in towards that direction, I'm going to lose a lot of energy vertically, because if my kneecap points to the screen, I can only unhinge and extend my knee in a vertical manner. When I push into the ground with my foot, we just talked about angles. Ground contact force, meaning the energy I put into the ground, is immediately and directly ground reaction forces in the same direction. So we have to understand that. And the reason we take a pattern drill and we'd have an athlete do this over and over again is because when we're in this position, now we understand those two things. I'm only going to go where my knee joint unhinges. If it unhinges vertically, I'm going to go there first, then move horizontally. So I'm going to lose time and distance based off of energy leaking to the sky instead of across the earth. If you're moving laterally, it's because something is taking you that way. There's a reaction, there's a ball that's taking you lateral. You need to go get that ball. You can't waste time going up, because I've never seen a ball stop in place, hop, and then continue rolling or moving wherever it went. If the ball is not changing direction and not exchanging or going anywhere else, you shouldn't. Every time you do, you are literally slow. Your only two things that happen when you are a defender are you either create space to the ball or you close space to the ball. And that is it. You are either doing one or the other at all moments in time, period. So as we continue and I drive off this is what we see. Good push. And if you've ever been in, for athletes that have been with me, they're always extremely amazed that I cover more ground with one shuffle than I do sprinting. But the whole reason for that is because at a lowered position like this, you want to think if someone were squatting and then just exploding from their squat. Position-wise, I am in a better position to create energy. But when I turn my knee, I am starting to be in control of the direction of that energy. And that is what is fundamental about being explosive as a defender. You can be fast, you can be all those things, you can do all the drills in the world. But if I see you change direction and I don't see this internal rotation happen, if it's lateral, you're not maximizing the ability of you as an athlete. And so those are the things we'd pattern. And we do this once again. We do this EDDs, everyday drills. Pattern, pattern, pattern. And then we do it again. Lean, start to fall over, and then you're attacking the ground. Push. And we're always covering as much ground as possible. And I wish that play would work. So now let's kind of go over the drop steps, and then we'll have some examples of how you would see athletes move. So in our drop step, and this is probably I love outfield. I love teaching drop steps, okay? And we got to get a little background about drop steps right away. Drop steps were considered, most people approach them like we're playing basketball. When you understand context of movement, what I mean by that is that you understand the goals and objectives of a sport. If I see a drop step in basketball, predominantly when that happened and when that move occurred was because that athlete was about to get vertical and either shoot the ball, dunk the ball, sky hook, whatever. That was their next task and objective. Number one. Number two, the constraints of the game are typically, if you drop step, you're picking the ball up, so you can't travel. I know in today's game, everybody takes 55 steps, but you couldn't do that originally. So the constraints of the game tell us that if I'm going to drop step, I have to pivot. And this fundamentally is the biggest flaw when we teach drop steps, period. You will pivot off your right or left foot to open up the opposite direction. And I just talked about it. If positionally, it doesn't matter if you're in good position. If you're not concerned with putting application of force into the ground, you're not going to get it out. And for most kids and most coaches that I see teach outfield, you completely make your first step and your first step irrelevant because you don't put any energy into it. And that's just, if our rules of the game are I've got to close space to the ball as quickly as possible, or if you want to call your outfielders sprinters with gloves, I've never seen anyone sprint not using their first step to be explosive in my life. They'd lose every race. So when we talk about drop steps, we're going to talk about the same internal rotation that happens for us in a drop step. So this is another patterning drill. All you're seeing is I'm going to rotate the foot and I'm going to change my center of gravity. I'm going to literally lean back, and I have a side view of this that we'll show. And the reason I do that is because as soon as the ball's hit, I need to start thinking about making shin angles that are going to take me towards the ball. I can't not create a shin angle that doesn't take me to the ball. I will lose it and make it vertical if I pivot, number one, and number two, if I don't start moving my center of mass back. And that means your hips. Your hips are just driving backwards as this happens. So when I rotate, you'll see me fall backwards. You see that center of mass change. And notice, I never move this foot forward. I hear a lot about gather steps and these types of things. It is very simple. If you are playing elite level anything in life, the ball, once again, is not going to stop in place for you to step forward. The ball is not going to move towards in the sky, come back to where it was hit from, and then start moving again. So any time and any movement that you do that does that is irrevocably, and I said that word wrong, sorry, I'm passionate about this. Anytime you do that, you are taking away an athlete's ability to get to that ball. And I don't care that if your gather step only takes 0.002 thousandths of a second, the ball moves so much faster than you do as a runner. So much. So that could equate just to 3 inches. And if you're slower by gathering, then that equates to a foot. And we miss balls by that much, and we get yelled at and say, you got to be faster. I got to take 6 weeks to get into a speed and agility program that's going to make me faster. And that has nothing to do with it. You're only going to be as fast as the energy that you're able to access. And if you can't access the amount of energy that your body can create, there's an issue. And the reason that happens is because we have poor positions and poor patterns. That is why for a lot of athletes, I just want you to think about when you're in high school and you first start lifting weights. For the first couple of months, you see this, for most of you, you see this new speed that you develop. You see this new, oh man, because I'm stronger, I'm doing all these things faster. And then what happens? All those numbers continue to improve and go up exponentially. But at the time that your squat is 200% better than when you started, are you 200% faster? Do you change direction 200% better? No, but you're still spending tons of time performing a movement and exercise that at that moment is only about increasing your ability to perform that movement and not your ability to perform in the field of play. And that's incorrect. And the only way you're going to get to be able to express as much of your strength as possible, because there's strength and then there's relative strength, And then there's the ability to express that strength through movement. If you lack the ability to express your relative strength through movement, you're slow. You're slow. And you're never going to get faster until you improve that aspect of your game. You're not. You're going to get 15% stronger, but then you're only still going to use 50% of what that strength happens in real life in movement. And we can't have that happen. And that's why these fundamental things are so, so important, because they're backed by scientific positions of, if my knee is here, my ankle is here, my hip is here, then science tells me that I'm going to have the ability, based off this position, for my muscles to fire as hard as they do when I'm doing something that's in maximal contraction, a max squat, a max jump, all of those things. So when we drop step, we have to have these understandings. These have to be important things for us. And you can never not get better at it. You just can't. Because if you get stronger, then you have to learn how to use that power within the same fundamental movement. And so as I lean, notice my left foot leaves the ground and I'm still moving backwards. My eyes are still forward. And when I push, I can still get to 90 because my elbow dictates how much my hips are going to rotate. And this is so important, especially as an outfielder. We have a lot of drills that concern ourselves with turning our hips, tracking the ball, getting your eyes wherever. All those things are fundamentally, we have to understand this. Your eyes don't track the ball. They take pictures. They take moment by moment snapshots. And what happens is you place your glove or you take an angle that is familiar and recalled from how you've seen that ball in space at that moment in time before. It's just recall, kind of like the concept of muscle memory. And you, as an athlete, I know all of you have felt this, where you feel like you've taken the exact perfect angle to the ball and it either ends up too far inside of you or you've got to turn back around and try to catch it because it's too far to the outside of you. The reason for this is because your eyes will constantly lie to you, because if your elbow is not moving and swinging in the direction of the path of the ball, you're not staying in line with the ball. You're drifting 1 to 2 inches backwards or forwards. And if you're not talking about this, if you're not understanding the swing and how it changes and drifts you, then we are not fundamentally being sound. If I want to get to 90 degrees, and we'll see a couple of drills here to be examples, and be cognizant of your time, guys. So what we see, my elbow, as soon as it flips back, you don't see it again. You don't see it again because I know I'm already at 90. I don't have to look back to get to 90. And then I drop. And if we move forward, same thing with the left, I'll show you. So now here's what I'm talking about. Here's another patterning drill, power and pattern. There's my line. When I drive, and let's get to the feet a little more. When I drive towards that cone, my elbow has to find that red line. Not my eyes, not my head, my elbow. So if I lean back, and this is a power drill with patterning because I'm leaving the ground to apply more force, my elbow, no, that's a 91. Huh. Good job, Isai. Way to have the cone out for no reason. So here's where we talk about that lean. Look at my foot at the tape and look where I actually drop from. Push. I know one of these is going to angle towards the cone. There it is. So I want you to notice these differences. If I know I'm going 90, my elbow finds that the ball is going overhead of me. Look at where my foot hits. Very similar to a cross run, and I'm sprinting. Now, and this is what's important. This first step, look at the shin angle that my second step is going to be able to have. I am straight gas if I can do this. Your first two steps should cover more ground than any other step you take. Now, when we get to the angle, now we're right flipper, so right elbow. right elbow flaps, boom, hard towards that cone, and that gets my hips to that cone. And now if we notice where the foot is, the foot adjusts based off my elbow. They look like they're the same distance behind the tape, but it's more outside of my hip because now it's almost like moving laterally. Internal rotation, that's like a lateral move. And because I swing my elbows continually towards that cone, I get in that path. And that's what I want to happen. That's what I want to understand. And one of the drills that we do that with a lot, let's see, can I find it? Oh, I love when the thumbnail's unavailable. So let's see. Okay, let's look at this one right here. So if we'd enter a pattern drill, this would be more of a power drill for us. She's moving. We see push off the inside leg, gather. We work drop step. That has to internally rotate for her to happen. Boom. And now she's tracking ball with elbow. Those are the things we want to happen. And if I can find the exact drill, these thumbnails are killing me. Okay. Here we go. So this drill, very common. We have the hurdle set up because in our drop step, we choke the hurdle, meaning your shin gets as close to the hurdle because it provides feedback. Anything you put on the ground has to provide feedback and cues for you as a coach. If I put a hurdle on the ground, and this specific reason is that if she steps forward, she's going to hit the hurdle. So I don't have to tell her, she's going to feel it, number one. Number two, if we zoom in, you see these cones out here. This is a non-reactive drill, meaning that I've pre-planned it. This is change of direction. The difference between change of direction and agility is that agility, when you teach agility, that's unplanned events. So if I say left and right while they're moving, that would be considered agility. Change of direction is pre-planned. And this is what change of direction is. And you have to distinguish those two differences because I very rarely see people actually do true agility. If it's always pre-planned, it's not. It's not agility, it's change of direction. So they're working on their lean. They've got a specific cone they're going to. And these two kids are probably two of my better outfielders. So we notice, bang, drop, there's elbow. If they're getting deep, there's nothing wasted. And they're both at different angles, but we're closing here. And this is what we'd like to see. If I'm a shallow dropper, like say if they were going to this cone here, the only thing that changes is the elbow doesn't rotate as far around because it's in control of where our hip stops. And then like you saw me in the example video, the only thing that changes is you still don't move forward to go backward. You position yourself in a great lateral position, bang, if you were going to that cone. And those are things when we're talking about drills. If I have a crossover drill, notice the spacing of the hurdles. They're not very tight, considering if you look at her height. That's a big key there too. A lot of us, like I said in the beginning, do these hurdle drills and they're way too tight. You're promoting them to drive their knees up instead of applying force into the ground. So we have here, this would be a play type drill. And it's easy for me to coach here. I'm seeing too much knee height. So because I put the hurdles in a better space, I can be a better coach because now I can say, hey, what's going on? Now our first thing is a drop. We have solid plant. There's internal rotation, sets up the second foot to have good shin angle. And then here's a reactive drill. I tell them when to flatten. Look at the same patterns. Look at the angles that we create and the angles we should have. You should never see an athlete change direction straight up and down. They should already be moving with their torso. Do you see how we talk about separation? Her torso gets here first, and then her leg whips around. And these are things that should be happening for us fundamentally in any type of drill we do. And when you're setting up drills, understand what your goal and objective is. If I want this athlete to be able to drop better, and I want them to have to move fundamentally in the opposite direction of their drop, we just set things up in that manner. I want to be able to see that if she's moving laterally, because she has to go through each one of these cones. I could tell her drop here. I could tell her drop at the next one. She hears drop, and at the next cone, you see that step happen. We could have better torso separation, but you see her eyes are still on me, but everything else in her body is driving with the ball. That's not happening if you're pivoting. If you're pivoting and you tell your kids, open up your hips and run, you're going to force them to pivot, because you're not talking about that the hips will naturally open up if you turn your foot and have internal rotation. That is how that process always happens for us. And unfortunately the iPad wasn't working today with our videos. Otherwise I'd have a little bit more videos to clarify those points. But that's kind of it for those fundamental patterns. So if you guys have questions, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we can go ahead and answer those things.
Awesome, Esia. That was good stuff.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, let's do a prize giveaway real quick, and then we'll get into the questions. Sound good?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's do first the set of arm pro bands. You want to show those again real quick?
Okay, so arm pro bands, they're just like the Jaeger bands and those types of things. They come, and these are the ones I have here at the facility. So generally they'll have the wrist straps, you'll have this, and then the door anchor as well. They come in green or red. The red is higher tension, meaning that if you're an older athlete or you're a stronger athlete, you'd more than likely get the red as opposed to the green.
Awesome. All right, so we've got Atiana Ramirez. Thank you so much for being here. You've won the set of the arm pro bands. So shoot me an email, ccain@texasblaze.org. We'll get those sent to you. Thank you so much, Atiana. Thanks for being here. Also, for those of you who are Blaze members who are watching, Esia was really nice to do some of this work for us for our Blaze player development remote training program. So starting this week, you'll see some of his stuff on the One Softball app. So get ready for that stuff. That'll be awesome. All right. First question here, Esia. Do you have an example that you could give or show the people about what a pivot looks like, so they know?
What a pivot? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I would love to. I would love to. So there we go. White tape. Let me see if I can maximize my screen so I can see. There we go. So white tape. So pivots. You see me pretty clearly in my feet? Okay, so if we're drop stepping it, I don't care what you teach drop stepping. I have kids that come to me, their coaches teaching this, that, square. Me and Coach Kirk from UCLA agree that if you know how to drop step, you can be square and get to both sides if you know how your body works, period. But none of that matters. If you coach a certain way, if you understand your body, you should be able to be explosive, period. Period. That's mastery of me, not mastery of a drill. So this would be considered a pivot. I took time to open my hips, but I didn't cover any ground. I didn't create any energy in that direction. So you're wrong. You're slower than the ball right now. Because fundamentally, you turned this way because you saw something hit this way. And that energy that hit that ball is never going to stop moving in that direction. It's never going to do this. Never. Ever. So if I want to rotate, I would be here. And if I see ball hit, my center of gravity goes back, and I'm back. And that step happens behind where I was. And this is what I mean by, if you know how your body works, your hips, if you stand up, if you're there, do this. From right here, rotate your foot, because this is exactly what I did. I got internal rotation of the hip. Now, you don't even have to do it hard. Fall back and push off this foot. What do your hips automatically do? They open and unravel. And I don't ever have to teach you to do that or talk about opening your hips and running. I don't even teach recovery drills from the aspect of having to turn your hips 45 times and then go get the ball. To me, that's pointless. Number one, because why am I going to teach you and put you in a position that you've already failed or that I'm expecting you to fail? And number two, if you know how to rotate your foot, I can do that. And it's the same thing. My hips are going to follow what my foot does. And I don't have to do anything different. It's just me being a master of what my body does and understanding that there's things I can't change about the structure of my body. You can't. So we can use those things and positions and joints to manipulate us when we're moving. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was a good demo. I understand it better, at least. Okay, we've got a question from Brad Williams. Can you apply any of this, or can we apply video movement to slappers to create maximum force power out of the box? Have you done anything like that?
Yes. You can do this, and it's the same thing I do with my pitchers. People think that, understand this, that movement is movement, number one. Number two, how you walk, run, crawl, throw, generally, is how any skill happens. It is not vice versa. Hitting should not be, I need to learn to walk how people say we slap, how people say we underhand pitch. That's not how it works. So if we're talking about slapping, one of the biggest things when we're understanding direction of the foot is when we carry over, the biggest mistake we make is we don't get, after we've made contact, you don't get this elbow back around to first quick enough. That is the biggest thing that doesn't happen, because you have to understand your body works in an X. This elbow and this foot apply. And the easiest way to understand that is if you stand up, and if you don't have balance, you can hold yourself onto a wall. If you stand up, if you drive this foot down as hard as possible, as quickly as possible, and keep your arm right here. Now, if you pair the two, there's a huge difference in how quickly that sequence happens, because this side of your body and this part of your limb, this side of your limb work together. They create energy together. And that's the thing about like speed. When people teach about arm swing, stop doing linear arm swings or teaching kids this, or sitting down on your butt and swinging like this. You don't throw that way. Your humerus does not move, and supination and pronation of your arm to make your humerus work through your shoulder happens completely different. So why do you think it's appropriate to sit someone down and have them focus on pocket to pocket when they'd never throw that way in any other sport? You're teaching them a task, which is to explode, to create energy away from the spot they're at, because your brain only understands task and how you accomplish it. That's fundamentally what it's understanding, is a primal brain. So when you teach, and you teach an arm swing like that, especially if you have pitchers, you literally confuse their ability to self-organize, because they're trying to think about the 3 to 4 days a week that they're supposed to be going pocket to pocket, and then you're teaching them to pitch from external and internal rotation of the shoulder and supination, pronation movements of the hand and the arm. Two different things. And this is the problem with having someone that teaches speed and agility, or hiring them for your team, and they have no idea how to teach someone how to throw. Because that's simple. To me, that is like basic stuff. That's not how your humerus moves through your shoulder. That's not how your shoulder socket works. Why would you teach that? Well, because I got a certification that was from a book that has a template and a YouTube channel, and that's what we've done for 45 years, and all the reference section in that book is from 1985, but you're going to go to college and you can't cite a source that's older than 5 years. But that book can still cost you money, upwards of $400, and use sources from 35 years ago. We can get better. We have evolved. And that's what I said about if you saw and were a part of the HLT thing that Austin had last week, nothing is different from anything he said. That is how your body moves. And if you don't apply it to everything you do, you're limiting your athlete's ability to progress in either of those skills. Sprinting, throwing, any of them.
Awesome. All right, we got time for 2 more questions, okay?
Okay.
Let's do, Joe Wicker asked a good question. What is the best indoor strength drill a player can do to help improve the speed of the change of direction drill, AKA squats, deadlifts, jump rope, etc.? I think people right now are really concerned, what can they do at home, right? We're super limited. How do we get better right now?
So how do we get better right now? We pattern. Don't worry about strength, because 98% of you don't use the strength that you have currently within your movement. You don't. So we've got to worry about patterns first. And then if we're talking about what can we do strength-wise, or what can we can do low-level plyometrics all the time. Because if we're talking about the basis of how I teach, if I already help you with this pattern, if we're already really good internally rotating, and you see a kid already do this and internally rotate, we go to Newton's second law. Okay, I can't change how much they weigh immediately, but I can change how they accelerate into the ground. So the next thing I would do is now it can be a piece of tape, it can be a hurdle, whatever. I want to take myself off the ground, because when I add gravity, number one, I'm going to be heavier when I hit the ground. So my muscles are going to have to contract and work harder than they would if I was just doing this from a patterning standpoint. So think about those patterns and develop drills on your own that would make them put momentum as part of it, because when I create momentum, it's harder for me to change direction. Okay? Or you can be simple. Add plyometrics to it. Add depth. Here, hop, push, internally rotate. And I want to always be sure I'm seeing the pattern come out as I'm adding power to it. And then if I want to change that, one of my favorite drills is just a tape drill. So with our tape drill, now I just introduce, I don't need a lot of space. Like I said, if you can't work in a phone booth, you're not a good change of direction athlete. So now I want to move forward and backward and then see if I can create lateral movement. So I start in front of the tape, I'm gonna hop back, forward, and then back, and I'm gonna drive laterally. So I'm here, wait, push. And then I'm looking at my athlete. Is that happening? Is the internal rotation happening? Are they not getting tall? And that's the beauty of it. If you understand these fundamentals, you can make up any drill you want, because you understand the principles of it. You understand that, okay, if they have good patterns, how can I help them increase power? Okay, if you've got a box at home that's 6 inches, now you can step off the box. Boom. Is that pattern happening? All those things, you don't need anything with it. And for me personally, a goal of mine is always, what is the least amount of equipment I can use in order for this skill to happen? Because you don't have any of those things in the field. I hope that answers things fundamentally. And I know it's not like a super answer, but I really want you guys to learn and understand principles, because then you can be as creative as you want with the space you have. If you're accomplishing that task and goal, it's a good drill. Period.
And super relevant right now, right? Because everything you said,
yes,
everyone can do it, no matter what limited space you have.
Yeah. Use the cracks on a sidewalk, the tape, if you have tape, all those things.
Yeah. All right, we got our last question here. This is from Greg Reeder on Facebook Live. Can you?
I see you, Greg.
Okay. Can you expand on your comment on the 4th and 5th toe balance?
Okay, so that would take a long time to get into. So your foot, you have a talar foot and a calcaneal foot. So the way they work together, people think that your foot, there's a ball and socket joint in the middle of your foot. That's how you invert and evert. So when we're talking balance on the 5th toe, a lot of people don't understand that your foot feathers and moves away. So can you see my feet here? Okay. So yeah. If I'm here, when you see kids get in here and inside that big toe, okay, here I have a lot of stress at the knee. My 4th and 5th toe and the inside kind of this line here at my heel is where I will usually bear weight from. That is the stronger part of and portion of my foot. And I roll through those sides. So when I'm here, I want to be sure that the athlete, if I'm doing a balance drill, their knee stays on that 4th and 5th toe. That's what I'd like to happen. Because like I said, when you see the side angle of me doing internal rotation, like the pattern, when I'm doing this, when you see me hit this ground right here, my knee stays over the 4th and 5th as I push away. I'm not getting on the inside edge of my foot, because the inside edge of my foot is going to cause a lot of different, without getting deeper into it, a lot of different tensions that are going to happen at the knee that aren't good for me. Just the same way, you know, you see people that squat like this and do those things. It's not inherently bad. How it happens can be bad.
Awesome. Okay, that's great stuff. So we're going to do our last prize drawing now. Let's see, you said the kinetic leg bands, right?
Yes.
All right, awesome. We're going to pick our winner here. Okay, Tulia Lane. Tulia Lane, thank you so much for watching. You've won a set of the kinetic leg band, so shoot me an email, ccain@texasblaze.org, and we'll get that to you. Esia, I want to thank you so much for being here. This was really, really informative stuff. Anybody who's on, guys, if you rather Blaze or not, if you're Blaze, we will be uploading it, like I said, to your remote training on the One Softball app. But anyone who's interested in this information, we can get you the YouTube link. You're welcome to email me if you have any questions. But Esia, do you want to share your contact information as well and how people can reach out to you if they're interested?
Yeah, so I'm super accessible, guys. You can ask anyone who's kind of reached out to me. I'm not going to try to not give you information or anything. But there's multiple ways. My Facebook page, Footdoctor Esia. You can message me there. All the information on there, my email, my cell phone, those are my real stuff. A lot of people contact me on Instagram. IG, my Instagram is Footdoctor_Esia. And then, because it's just my name, and you can DM me, you can do any of those things. I'm so accessible, guys. And I just want you to understand that if you ask me a question, I love questions. If you think you have a challenging question, I love those even more, because I love having to defend what I do. Because here's anything in life. If you feel you do things at a world-class level, you should be able to take that to the bank all the time. And I feel that way about how I teach. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. That's why I love being around your kids. That's why I love all that stuff, because I see how hard they work. There is no other segment or group of athletes that work as hard as softball athletes. And that comes from someone who's worked with every major sports league, except the NBA. So I've been with NFL guys and not scrubs. I've been with high-level NFL movers. I've been with European soccer players. I've been with ladies in the MPF, all those things. Nobody works harder than you guys at such a young age. And you have to do it. You have to develop that work ethic, because no one else, well, everyone else is doing it. Everyone else goes to hitting. Everyone else travels 2 to 3 hours for pitching, hitting, fielding, all these things. Everyone's doing it. But how you do it is going to separate you.
Awesome. Esia, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. Guys, look forward for more of these webinar series. We're going to be doing another one most likely on Thursday. So hopefully you can catch us, and please reach out to Esia. Use him as a resource. He's an awesome guy. So we appreciate it.
Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you, guys.
Thanks everybody for attending. Hope you all have a great night.